acknowledging benchmark man, whom I coined some years ago because it was just too complicated to talk about the norm in discrimination law as being someone who was white, Anglo-Celtic, able-bodied, heterosexual, neither too old nor too young, mainstream religion, and slightly right of centre in terms of politics. So the idea of the benchmark was sort of a notion that encompassed all of those. I became interested in the concept of merit about 30 years ago as a result of sitting on university selection committees. And I remember one of the early committees I was on, and there were all these terrific women applied, but there was a male applicant who looked somewhat mediocre in comparison. However, the chair was very keen on this person, and he said what this person had was potential. So this was something that he could see that the rest of the committee couldn't. And so I was interested then in the way that merit was constructed, and that it had this important subjective element to it, which is often ignored. So when a High Court judge is appointed, for example, the Attorney General will say, this person was appointed on merit. And there's no reference whatever to what the criteria might be, no transparency. So we were assumed to simply accept that there was one person who stood out from the rest, who rose to the top like cream on coffee, and we would all objectively agree that that person was the best person, or as they used to say, the best man for the job. But of course, there might be 20 or 30 people, including women, if we actually looked at that. However, this construction of merit in sort of masculinist terms has become the norm, and was the norm in the legal profession, of course, for hundreds of years, that there wasn't, women were totally excluded. And so even when women entered law schools, and they're now, like in medicine, more than 60%, 65 to 70%, in fact, of all students, there are still very few women in senior and authoritative positions. So the assumption still is that the best person for the job is going to be a man. And I was going to read from you a quote from an interview that I did with a young woman lawyer. For instance, if I go to a meeting with a male partner and I'm sitting there really trying to listen and absorb and ask a few questions to draw out what the client wants, it's then very frustrating to be told afterwards, you didn't take charge of the meeting, didn't engage, you're not assertive enough, and didn't show authority. I would say, no, you weren't listening. You just went in there and laid down the law. You have one prism through which you judge whether it was a successful meeting, and that means you talked a lot. My perspective is that was a meeting where we needed to listen and ask questions and make suggestions. Everyone turns around pretending that the reason women aren't successful is because they're all locked out because they have babies. Actually, the problems are much more deep-seated. And I agree with that, so that we often ignore then this issue of the way merit is constructed in a particular masculinist way. So I commend Diane then for getting together this book, looking at the way merit is constructed, and really I think that when you look at the sort of bias that exists in terms of merit, that's a very strong argument in terms of targets and quotas. And I agree that I don't think it redounds against the incumbent at all to be appointed as a result of a quota, because otherwise, it's just one of the mates, another of the mates who is appointed, and that's then determined to be the best person for the job. That's what we have to challenge. So I think the first step is the understanding of what merit is, the way it operates, and I think Diane has done a terrific job there. Thank you.